When life hands Mrs. Mabel Maple a pile of impossible dreams, she doesn't just reach for the stars. She straps on roller skates and zooms past them. From jam-splattered disasters to dance floor victories, this is the laugh-out-loud tale of a woman who proves that the road to success is rarely straight, but it's always worth the ride. Benny Gomez had a talent for cooking the way a cat has a talent for doing taxes. None at all, but it somehow made for good entertainment. On Monday, his tomato soup was a silky dream. By Wednesday, the same recipe could have been used to strip rust off an old bicycle. The locals at Maplewood Community Kitchen had stopped asking what was in his food and started asking whether their insurance covered it. The day of the great soup disaster started innocently enough. Benny had promised Rita, the kitchen manager, that he'd make a simple carrot soup. He chopped, he stirred, he hummed a tune, then forgot to put the lid on the blender. The next 10 seconds could have been slowed down for dramatic effect. Orange puree sprayed across the walls, ceiling, and even into Mrs. Crumble's knitting bag. Toby, his best friend, wiped carrot mush from his hair and declared, "Modern art." Rita, scrubbing the ceiling, muttered, "Modern firing offense." 2 days after the soup incident, Rita marched into the kitchen holding a fancy-looking envelope. "We've been invited to Kitchen Kings Live," she announced. Gasps filled the room. The national cooking show was known for its intense challenges, dramatic slow-motion shots, and judges who could crush your soul with a single eyebrow raise. Benny clapped. "Wow! Who's going?" Rita didn't blink. "You, genius." Benny froze mid-applause. "Me? The guy who once burnt tea?" Rita smirked. "Exactly. You're unpredictable. They love drama." Mrs. Crumble patted his arm. "Don't worry, do. If you fail, you'll be famous for failing." Benny wasn't sure if that was comforting, but the thought of cooking in front of millions both terrified and thrilled him. Maybe this was his chance to prove he was more than a walking kitchen hazard. The Maplewood team was a colorful mess of personalities. Rita was the captain, part chef, part drill sergeant. She had a glare so sharp it could slice onions. Then there was Toby, who couldn't boil water without setting off the smoke alarm, but insisted he had creative vision. Mrs. Crumble, in her 70s, was the reigning dessert queen and could bake a pie that could win wars. And then there was Benny, wildcard, chaos magnet, and apparently, the star. Their first meeting was a mix of excitement and dread. "We're going to make Maplewood proud," Rita declared. "Or at least not get banned from television." Benny nodded, already imagining himself in slow motion, flipping a pancake like a pro. Unfortunately, reality would have other plans. Training day began with optimism and ended looking like the aftermath of a food fight at a carnival. Rita had set up a menu to practice: soup, main course, dessert. Simple enough, in theory. Benny's soup boiled over, Toby decided to caramelize onions with a hairdryer, and Mrs. Crumble locked herself in the pantry to focus, but was later found napping next to a bag of flour. By lunchtime, Rita was pacing like a general preparing for battle. "We need discipline. We need focus," she barked. Benny raised his hand. "Do we also need snacks? Because I'm starving." Rita sighed so hard, the curtains moved. If they were going to survive Kitchen Kings Live, they'd need more than recipes. They'd need a miracle. Benny's simple soup skills struck again during their next training. He tried making beetroot soup but forgot to secure the lid on the blender. The result? A bright magenta explosion that decorated the kitchen like an abstract art project. Mrs. Crumble gasped, "My pie crust," as a rogue splash landed right in the middle. Toby stood frozen, pink droplets on his face, before whispering, "I look fabulous." Rita just closed her eyes and counted to 10. "Benny, if this happens on TV, I will personally enroll you in mime school. No talking. No cooking." Benny, towel in hand, tried to clean up the mess, but the stain refused to budge. It was a reminder that in Benny's world, culinary experiments often doubled as interior design disasters. Rita decided the team needed a mock challenge to prepare for Kitchen Kings Live. They had 1 hour to make a 3-course meal. Benny, eager to redeem himself, took on the appetizer. He carefully chopped, stirred, and dropped the entire dish when he tripped over Toby's shoelace. The appetizer was now a modern floor salad. Surprisingly, Rita didn't scream. She just sighed. Plan B. Benny, help Mrs. Crumble. Working under the dessert queen, Benny learned a few tricks, like not measuring flour with gut feeling and the importance of not taste testing every 5 seconds. By the end, the team had a decent meal, and Benny realized maybe he didn't have to be the hero every time, just a helpful sidekick. Toby was convinced he was a culinary genius. Unfortunately, his ideas often belonged in a science lab. During one practice, he suggested a fusion dessert, sushi rolls made of chocolate cake and wasabi frosting. Mrs. Crumble nearly fainted. Young man, that's not fusion, that's felony. Benny tried to be supportive. Maybe just skip the wasabi. Toby pouted but eventually swapped it for mint. The result was surprisingly edible, though the judges on TV might call it brave rather than delicious. Rita, watching them experiment, muttered, "If we win, it'll be by accident." One afternoon, the team practiced spicy dishes. Benny, eager to impress, diced what he thought were mild peppers. Spoiler, they were not. Within minutes, Toby was fanning his mouth with a cutting board. Mrs. Crumble was gulping milk straight from the jug, and Rita was coughing so hard she had to sit down. "Why didn't you check the label?" Rita wheezed. "It said hot peppers," Benny replied innocently. "That's not a warning, that's a threat." Mrs. Crumble snapped. After the chaos settled, Benny felt awful, until Rita said, "You know, the flavor was actually great," once the pain subsided. For Benny, it was a small win. A fiery, tear-inducing win, but a win nonetheless. The town of Willowbrook had seen its share of odd events, but nothing quite prepared them for Gerald's idea, a jam jar jamboree to raise funds for the Community Creativity Fund. The plan was simple. Everyone would bring their weirdest homemade jam, label it creatively, and auction it off. Simple in theory, disastrous in execution. Mrs. Penneth, the 87-years-old retired librarian, entered a jar labeled Mystery Medley which she claimed was from the year my nephew still had hair. Gerald prayed it was just preserved fruit, but the deep burgundy color had an unsettling shimmer. The event was hosted in the town hall, which meant the echo of laughter and occasional horrified gasps bounced dramatically off the walls. Lily was in charge of the tasting table, and it was her job to try a spoonful of each jam before it was auctioned. She lasted through Ginger Raspberry Explosion and Pickled Blueberry Tango, before the * Mystery Medley * finally took her down. Her face went through at least 5 shades of confusion before she calmly slid under the table. Miraculously, she came to just in time for the auction, and despite the chaos, the town raised enough money to fund the community mural project. As Gerald said later, sometimes inspiration tastes weird, but it works. With the money from the Jam Jar Jamboree, the Willowbrook community was ready to tackle their mural project. The theme was the spirit of Willowbrook, but no one could quite agree on what that meant. Mayor Thompson thought it should feature the founding fathers, while the local children wanted a giant dragon holding an ice cream cone. In the end, they compromised by painting everything. Yes, everything. The wall became a chaotic blend of historical figures, unicorns, rolling hills, teapots, and inexplicably, a potato wearing sunglasses. The mural became a tourist attraction almost overnight. People traveled from neighboring towns just to see the bizarre masterpiece. Some called it art, others called it evidence that democracy is messy. Gerald found himself giving spontaneous tours, weaving elaborate stories about each section. And here, he'd say dramatically, is the potato, symbolizing our ability to keep things cool under pressure. The mural was proof that even when people don't see eye to eye, they can still create something memorable together. And in Willowbrook, that was inspiration enough. After the mural, Gerald decided the next community event should be less colorful. Enter the Sandwich Summit. The goal: find the ultimate Willowbrook sandwich recipe. Contestants lined up in the park, armed with bread, fillings, and unshakable confidence. Mayor Thompson went classic with turkey and cheese, while young Timmy O'Neill invented the triple crunch, involving peanut butter, pickles, and potato chips. Gerald, never one to be outdone, unveiled the Willowbrook Wonder, a towering creation with 12 layers and a tiny flag on top. The competition was intense, with the smell of grilled bread and sizzling bacon drifting across the park. The judges, stuffed after tasting 15 sandwiches, declared it a tie between the Triple Crunch and the Willowbrook Wonder. The decision caused an uproar until Timmy suggested they merge the two recipes into one. The resulting monstrosity was bizarrely delicious and was named the town's official sandwich. For Gerald, it was another reminder that collaboration often leads to the most unexpected and tastiest results. It was a sunny Saturday when disaster struck. Maribel's goat, Clarence, broke free from his pen and wandered into town. Clarence was not your average goat. He had a taste for mischief and an alarming ability to open latches. He trotted straight to Main Street, where he began sampling flowers from every window box. Gerald, sipping coffee outside the bakery, nearly choked when he saw Clarence wearing a child's sun hat and chewing on Mrs. Penneth's laundry. What followed was pure chaos. Half the town joined in the chase, with Lily brandishing a carrot like a magic wand. Clarence, clearly enjoying the attention, dodged every attempt to catch him until Gerald had an idea. He grabbed a slice of the Willowbrook Wonder sandwich and waved it like a prized trophy. Sure enough, Clarence trotted over, munching happily as Gerald slipped a rope around his neck. By the end of the day, Clarence was back in his pen. The flowers were replanted, and the town had yet another story to laugh about for years. The cafe had decided to introduce a new signature energy juice to appeal to the morning crowd. Unfortunately, Harold, in his boundless confidence, took it upon himself to prepare the first batch without reading the recipe. He threw in carrots, oranges, a suspicious amount of ginger, and, unintentionally, a slice of onion that had been sitting on the counter. By the time the first customer sipped it, her eyes watered like she was watching the saddest movie ever made. "It's strong," she choked out, and Harold, beaming with pride, took it as a compliment. Evelyn discreetly pulled him aside and whispered, "This is not energy juice, Harold. This is emotional trauma in a cup." They remade the batch, but the story of the juice that bit back spread quickly, giving the cafe yet another quirky reputation boost. One morning, a regular named Mrs. Penelope Penny Harper waddled in with her tiny dog, Biscuit, wearing a matching sweater. Penny had been visiting since the grand reopening, and she'd become a sort of unofficial mascot for the cafe. She ordered her usual, a cappuccino and a tiny biscuit for Biscuit, then announced she'd nominated the cafe for the * Local Gem Award star. The staff erupted in cheers, and Harold tried to hug Penny but instead ended up hugging Biscuit, who licked his face like he was a lollipop. "We're not just serving coffee, we're serving community," Penny said with a smile. Evelyn couldn't help but think, maybe their little cafe was becoming something bigger than she'd imagined. During a slow afternoon, Ricky brought in his guitar and started playing a cheerful, made-up song about the cafe's scones. His lyrics were absurd: "If you eat 3, you'll grow wings and fly to Spain." But customers began filming him, posting the videos online. By evening, the clip had gone viral locally. The next morning, they had a line out the door, with people shouting, "We want the scones song." Ricky repeated the performance, this time with Harold on tambourine and Evelyn trying not to laugh. The scones sold out in under an hour. Evelyn realized that in their own ridiculous way, they were mastering the art of making people feel good. For the cafe's 1-year anniversary under new management, Evelyn wanted to host a balloon and brew event. Free balloons for the kids, special drinks for the adults. Harold, assigned to inflate the balloons, borrowed an old helium tank from a friend. The problem? It wasn't helium. It was something meant for inflating party inflatables. The balloons drooped sadly within minutes. Thinking quickly, Ricky grabbed markers and encouraged kids to draw faces on the deflated balloons, turning them into balloon buddies. What started as a disaster turned into a hit. Parents took photos, kids loved it, and Evelyn once again marveled at how every mistake somehow turned into magic in their little corner of the world. When the city's annual Small Business Brilliance Conference announced a talent showcase, Maribel signed up without fully reading the form. She thought it was for pitching business ideas. Turns out, it was a live stage performance in front of hundreds. On the day, she stood backstage clutching a bag of emergency muffins for courage. The host called her name, and she stumbled onto the stage under bright lights. Her heart pounded. She opened her mouth to speak about her bakery's vision, and instead told an absurd story about how her cat once managed her shop for an afternoon. The audience roared with laughter, assuming it was part of her act. By the time she finished, people were crying with mirth and lining up to buy her muffins after the show. She didn't win the competition, but she walked away with a pocket full of business cards and the nickname "the Muffin Lady who made us cry laugh." Among the people who approached her at the conference was Mr. Clarence Finn, a retired chef with a flair for flamboyant scarves and unsolicited advice. "You've got the magic, kid," he told Maribel, slapping a business plan template into her hand. Under his mentorship, Maribel learned how to price her goods properly, negotiate without apologizing, and market her accidental comedy baking brand online. He even convinced her to start a Muffin Monday video series, where she baked while telling ridiculous stories. Her follower count grew fast. Not everyone came for the recipes. Some came just to hear her misadventures and laugh along. Maribel realized she didn't need to separate her humor from her baking. They were both part of her recipe for joy. Months later, Maribel entered the city's Great Bake-Off. This time, she knew exactly what she was walking into. She crafted a batch of courage muffins, banana, honey, and a pinch of cinnamon, each with a silly motivational quote inside the wrapper. During judging, one of the sternest painlists bit into her muffin. Read the quote, "Life is short, lick the spoon," and actually snorted into his coffee. Maribel didn't win first place, but she took home the Spirit of the Bake-Off award, plus a surge of online orders from amused spectators. 1 year after her first disastrous cake order, Maribel's shop buzzed with customers. Kids came in for the free joke cards she handed out. Office workers stopped by for laugh therapy along with their coffee. She even hosted a monthly muffin and mirth night, where locals swapped funny life stories over baked goods. As she locked up one evening, Maribel thought about how close she'd come to giving up that first week. Instead, she'd embraced her mistakes, shared her quirks, and built something bigger than she'd imagined. Her muffins were still sometimes lopsided, her stories still occasionally ridiculous, but they were hers. And in a world that could be so serious, Maribel had learned the sweetest recipe of all. Mix courage with comedy, bake with heart, and serve with a smile. A month after the grand festival, everything in Berrydale seemed brighter, though it might have been the new gold paint on the bakery door. Mabel stood at the counter, a tray of perfectly toasted bread in front of her. No burn marks, no smoke alarm, not even a dramatic collapse of the toaster. "Looks like you've cracked the code," Greg grinned, biting into a slice. It only took 37 tries, a broken whisk, and a minor visit from the fire department, Mabel replied, sipping her tea. "But yes, I suppose I did." The bakery had become more than a shop. It was now the heart of the village. Tourists stopped by to take photos with the world's happiest toaster. Locals dropped in just to chat, and Mrs. Pickles finally started a book club in the corner booth. Even Jasper the cat had upgraded from sulking in the storeroom to napping on the sunny windowsill. One customer, a shy teenager, handed Mabel a small thank you note that read, "You made me believe I could do something too." She tucked it under the register and smiled. That was worth more than any sale. Greg leaned against the counter. "So, what's next for you? World domination? National Toast Championships?" Mabel laughed. "No, Greg. Just more good bread. And maybe a few more chances for people to walk in here, have a laugh, and remember that even a burnt toast can start a great story." The bell above the door jingled as a new customer stepped inside. Mabel handed over the first perfect slice of the day, and for once, it wasn't just warm, it was golden. And so, in a tiny bakery in a town that had learned to laugh at its mistakes, life went on, perfectly imperfect. If you've ever felt like giving up before the punchline, this story is your reminder to keep going. Hit like if you laughed, share if you were inspired, and subscribe for more tales that turn life stumbles into standing ovations.